So one thing that you mentioned uh, in that transition from kind of data analyst focused more on visualization tools like Tableau and moving a little bit up the stack to analytics engineering, you were getting more into
Mhm.
DBT, right?
Yes.
So
Yes.
tell us about DBT, why a company would use it, how you interact with it, what it does.
Yes. So DBT is a data building tool. And essentially,
Oh,
what we
I
were
didn't know
doing,
that.
yeah. So I actually think that I looked this up actually, I would say a few months ago because I wanted to double check because I went to the DBT conference this year, which was a ton of fun. And because someone had asked me and I was like, well, I believe it stands for data building tool, but I wanted to double check. I guess it used to, but now they have transitioned to just be
Yeah, yeah.
DBT. So, but
Yeah.
I
That
mean,
happens all the
it's
time.
still, yeah, but it's still data building tool. And so essentially we would work with, if we already had um, the data in our database, but it was in a raw format, and we need to expose it or surface it in a way for our stakeholders to utilize it in a visualization tool. We would go in, we would take the raw source of it, and essentially you're writing SQL, more or less. So DBT also does have Python type of coding within it that allows you to, I would say it allows you to do kind of SQL on steroids a little bit. So you get to do some different things with it that essentially allow you to, especially if it's something redundant in your code, they have different functions that allow you to just consolidate to speed things up, which is really, really nice. And so essentially, that's what we were doing as far as my day to day. So I was going in, I would say initially wasn't building out models from scratch, but I would be adding to models that were in there already. So adding different fields, adding a lot of business logic, because that was really important too. And what I really loved about DBT was that you can embed your business logic, your agreed upon business logic with your stakeholders, and then have it documented. And that was a really, really big thing that I love. So DBT has a documentation part of their tool, DBT Docs, that allows you to have definitions. And actually, they have an automated version of this now, which is fantastic. Because I'm not going to lie, when you're building out a model, especially from scratch, and let's say you have 30, 40 fields in your model, the last thing you want to go do is build out a document and then just write out all the definitions of all of these things, especially when you feel that, for example, if it says created date, you're like, well, it's created date. Do I really need? But a lot of times you probably need that definition because created date might not mean what you think it means all the time. And so,
It sounds like that's a generative AI assist coming in there. And it
yes,
sounds like, actually a great use of it. There's all kinds of times where generative AI is showing up in my life today. For example, I don't know, have you ever used or do you use a Whoop for tracking like your sleep and
I have an Aura ring, but
right,
similar.
right.
Yeah.
Well, the Whoop in the Gen AI mania of 2024, they incorporated in this daily Gen AI guidance thing that like I looked at it one time and I was like, oh, please never show me that again. It's just you don't need that in your life. Like you're getting all the information you need. I don't need this kind of generalized like just it's using general advice about fitness, which I
Oh,
guess maybe
interesting.
somebody out there is finding it useful, but it's like um, make sure you get lots of water in your day and like
Mm,
just anyway.
yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I'm sure we could go off tangent on that, but it is interesting how, AI is so powerful and it's very cool, but it's interesting how, but it also doesn't need to be everywhere for certain things.
Yeah.
But especially for oh, sorry, you were going to
But
say.
yeah, but in DBT, automatically
Oh, yeah.
creating a documentation for all the fields that you have in a data file, that sounds like
Yes.
it can at least, you should be reading over that and making sure that it's accurate. But,
Oh,
that
absolutely.
it saves you the blank page problem.
Yes. Well, and also now they have a feature where you can identify a field. I believe they're called doc blocks, where you can define a field, let's say in your initial staging layer model, and then you can reference that throughout all of the lineage, throughout however that where that column goes or field goes in your downstream models. which is so nice because then it's just efficiency and you can spend more time working on the actual model itself. But I loved that component. And I also think it was really, really good because then it forces the the data team to work with your stakeholders and really come to terms with, hey, this is our logic and this is our definition of this thing. Because you can't expect, especially if you're wanting to change how a team speaks about, what, let's say, active customer means or something like that. If your data isn't representing that, that's going to be really hard to make that change with your conversations. So having that not only for, your stakeholders to reference back, but also when you have new engineers coming in, that's huge when they're trying to learn what the data means and what granularity your models are and all of that stuff. That's just infinitely helpful. And so being able to be on a tech stack like that was so, so nice. And it can get kind of tedious, especially, but I mean, now that we have this generative process, it's, not taking long at all, but it still was so nice to have that as, no, this is just what we do. Like any model that's created, like everything has to have a definition. So essentially that's what we were doing. And then, started progressing to building out models from scratch when we were getting new data in, and then exposing that into tools like Tableau or Sigma, and then building out dashboards for our teams to be able to use.
What's Sigma?
So Sigma is another data visualization tool. And so it was really nice so Tableau, well, I guess you can run it a few ways, but essentially with Sigma, it sits right on top of Snowflake and works really, really well with that. So that ingestion process was kind of removed. Anything we had in Snowflake, we could build off of in Sigma. And it was really good I would say that initially when I opened up Sigma, it definitely can look a little bit like Excel, which I was like, oh, I don't know. And then especially because I feel like I'm sure lots of people in data can relate to this, but a lot of times you're trying to get people out of SQL, or not out of SQL, out of Excel. Not all the time. Sometimes it's, necessary, but for the most part, you want it consolidated. You want everyone to be looking at the same numbers. So there's consistency, when we're speaking about making business decisions. But it was great because I think it has the capacity to allow for people that are in data analytics that are trying to do really high level analytics and insights with it. But it was great as far as for PMs and other people to get in there and they're really familiar with Excel. So they're like, oh, this is great. It's just like Excel plus, and it has a lot of other features. So that was really great as far as adoption goes for both teams, which was really cool.